Hi, this is Dustin with Dustin's Dollars. Today I'm going to be talking about Tellurian, about Souki getting fired from the board. And before I begin, let me remind you that I'm not a financial advisor or a financial professional of any sort. All opinions I express in this video are mine and do not represent those of any company or any other individual. I currently hold a long position in Tellurian, so this video should be for entertainment purposes only because I could be wrong about everything I say in this video. You need to do your own research before making any investment decisions. All right, so I already put it in the description. Hi, Wakaza. Hey, Transient Stacker. Thanks for hopping on the stream. This was pretty big news on Friday. Martin Houston becomes the chairman of Tellurian, and I've had a surprising number of people reach out to ask me what I thought about this, and so I figured I'd talk about it this Sunday on my weekly stream. And the short answer that I'll just give you up front, nobody really knows outside of the board of directors right now. And but I do have a couple thoughts on this, so I'll go through those today. And in a situation like this, there's a lot of uncertainty. I like to start off and just list out and remind myself what are the actual facts here, And so the facts are he was fired as the executive chairman, and I do believe he was fired. I don't believe he was stepped down. I think the particular language, this is in the 8K that was filed, says that the company provided notice of termination without cause. And so I believe this means that Souki didn't do this. He was not a part of it necessarily, or maybe he voted against it presumably. But I don't think that this was voluntary on his part, and he is remaining on the board. And they said this here, they might have to pay Souki, sever, resigns from the board. But really the important part here, hi, Steve CDC, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Thanks for hopping on the stream. So, sorry, where was I at? They're removing him as the executive chairman, right? And so he ceases to have apparent or actual authority to act for or on behalf of the company, right? And so he's not acting as an officer. He can't be, he's not an authorized spokesperson. That is pretty big. And Martin Houston now, as I mentioned, is the chairman of the board. But if you notice, he's not the executive chairman. So Souki was moved up as executive chairman. So he was, an officer of the company actually having responsibilities. Martin is now installed as the chairman, but not the executive chairman. So there's a slight difference there in terms of what the role is going to be for Martin versus what it was for Souki, in that Martin is going to be, overseeing the board and as a board of director, overseeing the company, but not necessarily, not necessarily at the place where he's going out and acting on behalf of the company, trying to make deals, et cetera, as we imagine Souki has been. We also know, and this goes into, the fact that this doesn't appear to have been a voluntary thing. Souki had this coffee talk already, just last Tuesday, and he did not give any indication there, that this was happening, or anything that would indicate a difference in either his role or the company direction. One other relevant piece of information that is not from Tellurian, but is from the past, this is from Chenier. And so if you're not familiar with the story of Chenier and Souki, he was the founder and the CEO of the company. And there's clearly a lot to Chenier, but at the very end of Souki's role with the company there, he was still the CEO, and he was ousted by the board and mostly Carl Icahn. This is a CNBC article from 2016 about it. Again, this is before Tellurian, or I guess maybe around the time when Tellurian was being formed, or it was post Chenier. And he said, basically he had a difference of opinion. And, Kramer asked Souki who specifically would differ on opinion enough with him to ask him to leave. And Souki responded, Carl Icahn, right? And there's one other quote I wanted to get out of here. Yeah, so basically Souki said, he didn't get rid of me because I couldn't do the job or how he was doing the job. It was about Souki not doing what Carl Icahn wanted him to do. So we see this in the past where Souki was willing to hold on to his position, his opinion, not necessarily his position in the company, but his opinion, and didn't really just go along with the group. I think Amazon has these leadership principles, and one of them is I think it's called disagree and commit. And that's basically even if a group comes to a decision, even if you argued against the outcome, once the group comes to a decision, you go along with it. And Souki right here is basically saying, nope, I'm not about that. I had my opinion and I'm holding to it. And so these are all sort of the facts. And I know so now I get, what does that mean for the company? And we don't really know, right? And because the thing that we need to know is not just what happened, but why did they decide to do this? And I do have a couple of possibilities that I would want to talk through that I've thought about myself. And some of these have slightly different implications for the company. And I'm going to go through these from what I personally think are roughly the least likely to the most likely. Sorry, there's a couple in the chat. Let me see real quick. Kaza says, congrats, Dustin. You perfected a live stream and you have 417 subscribers. Yep, it's doing great. I really appreciate everybody who watches. And looks like you're getting electrocuted right now, EMS therapy. That's interesting. I hope it works out for you. I know there's lots of interesting stuff out there. All right, so if you go through, I think from the least to most likely, one thing that had floated to me from somebody is they said, hey, was there some kind of inappropriate conduct? And that seems really unlikely given the fact that he's still on the board. So I just don't think that's at all the case, and I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Hopefully y'all agree with me on that one. Another one is just he's a bit too much of a liability for the company. If you look at the past, he's tied his personal finances, by margining the stock. And, when he got margin called, it had a big impact on the company's stock at the time. He does these coffee talks, which as an investor, I appreciate, but I can imagine, there's a reason why a lot of companies don't do those things, because he says a lot of stuff on there that could, I'm not a lawyer, but seems like it could be a bit of a liability, especially if he missaid something or kind of overpromised. I think these are, potential liabilities for the company. And then I'm not going to go into too much of, but there are these other lawsuits, between, I want to say it's Souki and Chris Parker. We had some exchanges and talking about the stock, and maybe even some language around guaranteeing that. And so those are those, and yeah, Transient Stacker saying due to his real estate bankruptcy. I did see a little bit. There was some. I've been so busy in my personal life, I haven't gotten to read all the theories in the Discord. So hopefully I'm not just repeating everything they've said in there. But I skimmed just for a couple of minutes, didn't have a lot of time. But I saw somebody saying something about that, about how there was the lawsuit that was ongoing or maybe starting up, and they thought that the timing of this may have been removing him from the company, may have had some tie to this. I really don't know. I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently. If somebody on the Discord has a good theory there, and they have some direct insight into that, I would listen to them over me for sure. But sort of just there's a collection of these things where he's not just a standard executive. He's doing a couple of these other things where he's a bit of a wild card. And I could imagine maybe at some point somebody said, hey, this is just a bit too much of a liability. And maybe that's just one factor amongst others as to why they removed him. Just something to note there. Now we're getting to some of what I think are the more likely pieces. There's a very good chance that he was just disagreeing with the company direction, right? Maybe because one other thing out of this press release, I guess I didn't highlight too much, but they say these changes are not the result of any material or unexpected financial events. So it doesn't seem like, hey, there is there wasn't some big thing that has happened, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't a big disagreement about the direction they should go from here, right? They've clearly been going in sort of one direction, and they're talking about, what are they going to do for 2024, right? A lot of companies do these annual plans. And so, in November, December, they tend to be looking at what are we doing for next year, or making adjustments to the company direction. And, we know that was a big part of it at Cheniere, where I'm oversimplifying here, but I believe it was basically Souki wanted to reinvest everything, expand like crazy. And Carl Icahn wanted to start distributing some money to shareholders and was looking at how soon can we start paying out to shareholders. And, that's sort of two ends of the spectrum. And Souki just wanted to build and build and build. And this is another thing where, clearly they've been very aggressive in funding a lot of Driftwood up to this point, even though they didn't have the full FID financing. And there may have been some very significant disagreements about what they do at this point in time. It's really hard to say, but that does seem like, something that's a bit more likely. And this is one that I did see. I've had a couple people ask me about this, was this some condition for a partner to join? And I mean, you can cue all your Carl Icahn jokes. Maybe Carl Icahn's getting into Tellurian now too, like he did for Cheniere. I think he actually sold out of a lot of his Cheniere position this year, and so maybe that's possible. But I mean, jokes aside, it is possible that there's some equity partner, they're buying into this company. They're going to have a very, very long-term commitment with them, and they're vested in their success. And they may have said, hey, we're willing to invest in the company, but we just don't like Souki. He's too much of a wild card, right? And that goes back to what I said, where he's a bit of a liability. And so that's legitimate. I think that's a pretty bullish take to say, hey, they've got a deal on the table, but somebody just didn't want, somebody's ready to sign, but they want Souki gone. And so, hey, Souki's gone, so now we should expect deals soon. I mean, that would be fairly bullish, of course. I don't know how likely that is. That they have been, there have been hints from Souki himself that they are working with these equity partners, that they're making good progress and they're close to something. So it's not that outlandish to really think, although it's really hard to say, right? It could be, and this does get down to the language here, that these changes are not the result of any material or unexpected financial events. It could be that a deal fell through, right? Maybe, I think that this has happened in the past, right? If you look at all of the conversations they've had in public in 2021, 2022, certainly seemed like they had some deals on the table. And things have fallen through. So I don't think this would be the first time, but this may just be like the straw that broke the camel's back. Because Souki could have been responsible. They could have been negotiating this. He could have said, no, we're holding out for, Henry Hub, for basically, a 275 fee, as he sort of alluded to in the past. And maybe the counterparty was not willing to go that far. And Souki said, let's walk away. And maybe they walked away, and then they lost, the counterparty didn't come back, and the counterparty, they lost the deal. And, if Souki was responsible for this one, it is quite possible that this, as I said, was sort of just the straw that broke the camel's back for the rest of the board, and they said, all right, you're out of the negotiations. Again, this gets back to, they removed him as executive chairman. So he's no longer, doesn't have the authority to act for or on behalf of the company. And that's really what gets me to think about which one of these scenarios is the most likely, where they're keeping him on the board, but they took away his ability to act as an executive, basically. And, I think that's semi-likely. Sorry, let me pause and see some of the chat messages. Steve, and again, sorry for mispronouncing that. Steve CDC says, if firing Souki benefits Tellurian, great. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was always part of my sort of a cognitive dissonance type of thing, where having Souki there and his experience and his past achievements was always part of my bull thesis for Tellurian. But at the same time, the execution has not matched, right? They had these circumstances that seemed to be great for them, and they just didn't get it done in 2021 or 2022. And at this point, I personally don't know enough to know whether he's a net positive or net negative to the company. I hear lots and lots of opinions on both sides of the fence there, and I don't know. It's really hard to judge. Well, Kaza says, Dustin is like the book called Finance the Non-Financial Manager, or Dustin, an expert in reading and translating financial statements with extra stuff. Yeah, I'm not going to give myself that much credit, but I really appreciate the kind words. If I can speak. Transient Stacker asking the hard questions. Do you think there will be more coffee chats? I would guess that there are not. And the reason why, I think, really comes down to this, where he's no longer an authorized representative or an authorized spokesperson of the company. And of course, Souki can make his own YouTube videos if he wants. I don't think they're going to be on the public Tellurian YouTube channel. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's still able to do this. Martin has done speaking engagements as, the vice chairman or just a member of the board of directors of Tellurian, but I don't know if that's the same as putting out official communications from the company, as sort of his coffee chats have been. But maybe the bigger thing is, if he's no longer an authorized spokesperson for the company, I would guess that means that the company is probably not covering him under their whatever liability they have. Right? You watch his coffee talks, and the last 2 minutes is, here's all these disclaimers and forward-looking statements, and the company does that because they're putting this out. He is acting as an authorized spokesperson, and he presumably has some legal protection that the company provides because he is acting on behalf of the company there, and that it has gone through some amount of review from their lawyers, and they have some amount of insurance coverage that does cover him. I would guess, and again, I don't know for sure, but I would guess that him no longer being authorized spokesperson of the company probably means that he no longer has that level of, protection, and he may not want to. He may be very, very much dissuaded from having similar coffee chats as he had in the past with the removal of that insurance on his part. That is my guess. Transient Stacker says the first videos didn't have Souki. So that's actually a great point. Yeah. So if you go back, Meg used to have I can't remember. They weren't called coffee chats. They were just, I think, chat with Tell, I think is what they were called. If you go way, way back, a couple years. And yeah, they didn't have, most of them did not have Souki, and then they had the CEO, and they even had some, they used to have an old investor relations guy who would run these, and he'd do some interviews with a couple of different executives. I remember listening to one about the prior CFO. So there was, that's a great point where maybe they will start this up somewhere else. Although to some degree, I wonder if that concept was pushed by Souki himself the whole time. I don't know, but it's, you don't see that sort of communication from other companies. Other people have reached out to me. Taking away Souki's executive authority, I think about this as somebody who works in a company and sees corporate politics. Who gets more power here? Because Martin is no longer an executive chairman either. Shinde no longer, but he wasn't installed as executive chairman, only the chairman. And so really this gives a lot more power to the CEO, Octavio, because this whole time, a lot of the limelight and a lot of our conversations revolve around Souki himself, but Octavio is the CEO of the company. He is out there, doing the job, trying to make the deals as well, presumably. And, it could be that Souki was in the negotiating table or at the negotiating table and, kind of overruling Octavio and being the voice of the company. And Octavio was a very successful person before it came to Tellurian. And to me, this seems like the most likely scenario. And maybe maybe I have a tinfoil hat on, but it could be that Octavio just got tired of being overruled. He's like, I'm the CEO, but I don't even have the authority that I would have, that every other CEO in the world has, because Souki is here. Souki's the executive chairman, and he's actually calling the shots, and I'm more, I don't actually have the autonomy that I want. And so it's quite, in my opinion, the most likely explanation is that Octavio, either the board saw it or Octavio himself said, hey, I can't actually do a good job because Souki is overruling me. And it could be that Octavio said, y'all need to pick, it's him or me, because I can't actually do my job, so I'm going to walk. Because I assume Octavio is independently wealthy from his prior work at, Sempra. And, so he may not really need this job. He might want it, but, if he can actually do his job, and given how things are, he might feel like they can't actually get things done with Souki in the room there. And so to me, that seems interesting. All right. Couple more chat messages. Oh, I see a bunch of reactions on there, but yeah, that's fun. Sorry, a couple chat messages. Let me see. Transient Stacker says it would be nice if they had at least one more video explaining things. I agree. And so this is my conclusion here, right? What does this mean for the company going forward? Overall, if I go through and look at most of those scenarios that I just went through, I think it means that they're changing directions. The degree to which they're changing directions is really hard to say. I think if I go for some of the later interpretations where maybe it happened where a deal fell through, or Octavio really wants more autonomy to make the deals and to get things done, probably that means that they're going with a slightly less aggressive negotiating position. They're trying to get things done and move forward, and that would be good for the company, I think. If the alternative is we're holding out for such a sweet deal that we can never get, then obviously it's better to just get things done now with the worst deal. And you go back and you listen to some of his prior talks, and Souki is he certainly projects that he's holding out for the best deal possible. And there's some trade-off that you have to make between getting the very, very best deal possible and being expedient about things. And it's, again, quite likely that it's going to mean that they're prioritizing being, getting things done and being more expedient over getting the best possible deal. And again, short term, sorry, I'm getting back to your comment, Transient Stacker. Short term, if the company says nothing, what does this mean for the stock is going to depend on what, investors think it means, right? So I agree with you that if they had some communication to explain this, that would be great. Whether that's a video from Souki or another press release or a video from Martin or Octavia or somebody that kind of says, this is a new company direction. This is why we did. This is why he's no longer the executive chairman. I think that's highly unlikely for us to get. I think that if they were going to put something out, it would have been with this press release here. They would have said something, or they would have sugarcoated a little more and say, hey, he's stepping down to go spend time with his family or whatever. And that would be at least a little more, a little more palatable, a little less, just less harsh than, hey, we're firing him. We've delivered this notice of termination, and he may or may not decide to actually separate from the company. And if he does, we're gonna have to pay him severance, right? That's kind of how this reads. It would be great to get some more rationale communicated from the company, so that will remove all this uncertainty, right? We don't have to speculate about it. We know, and then we can see what the direction is. And I personally think if they came out and they just said, we are looking to make deals, and Souki really just wants to hold out for the best deal possible, and we think that's too aggressive, or we're never going to get that, and so we want to move forward. Frankly, that might be a really good thing for the stock and the company. Sorry, let me go on to some other comments. Ryan Gilbert says, funny how he talked about high frequency trading and next week he's off the board. Just kidding, but funny. It kind of is, right? And this is he's talking about high frequency trading and short sales. I mean, those things are, to some degree, I think, true explanations for why the stock moves how it does in the short term. Long term, in the general range of the stock price, lots of times really just depends on what the execution of the company has been to date and what people expect in the near future. And I think, the stock being valued where it is just reflects where the company really is right now, unfortunately. Well, Kaza says, what internet carrier do you use, Dustin? I use a local company that I just switched this week, actually. Hopefully this week it's a little bit better. I got fiber run to my house now, so should have a lot more bandwidth to do this. Ryan Gilbert says, I think the company has not executed on decisions properly and needed a change to get the next step. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, I think that's what the board is kind of recognizing, and that's really why this happened. It's possible that in the past they did have a deal that was, it's possible that they negotiated with somebody, and this is another, I didn't really call this out as its own possibility, but it's something that I was thinking about, where they may have had a deal with someone, or they were close to a deal, and Souki ended the whole thing because he said, that's not good enough, we're walking away. And this gets back a bit to, was this some condition for an equity partner to sign on for Souki to go away? I mean, maybe that would be great if that means they're going to sign equity partners very, very soon. But on the flip side, it may just be that Souki was too hard of a negotiator and people were tired of trying to do business with him. It could be that they said, all right, we've gone through this for months and months and you're not budging. Sorry, we're never going to continue the conversation. So it could be that the board removing him is the board being serious and saying, all right, we are serious about getting back to the table and making a deal. We got rid of Souki. He was the one who was really holding out for these, sweetheart deals on our side. He was having these coffee chat videos talking about how much money Tellurian was going to make, because when you're in the middle of negotiations, you're saying, I'm just going to be wildly profitable and making so much money. Of course, your counterparty is going to say, I don't think I need to go as far as you're telling me that you're not willing to go anymore, right? Like if you're saying you're to make all this money, I want a piece of that too. So maybe I don't need to come meet you exactly where you want to be. We should come closer to where I want to be. And so maybe getting rid of Souki, my point is getting rid of Souki might entice some of those people who have shut off conversations to open them back up, where the company come back and say, look, he's no longer here negotiating. We want to make a deal. And so to me, that is the most likely outcome. So yeah, that was basically what I had to talk through today. I'll leave it open. I know there are a couple people on the chat. I really appreciate y'all coming on here and some good questions and comments. Overall, it's again, I have a pretty bullish bias here. I've been investing in the company for a while. And some of that bias does come from Souki himself, where he's had these coffee talks and said, hey, we are actually talking to equity partners. We are, close to putting deals together. We're making progress, and it's just hard to really see. It's hard to believe that those things are at all true, and then see a move like this and not think that this isn't the company looking to get those deals done, right? Because if they were at all close, they've got to be trying to get over the finish line at this point. They're looking forward to 2024. They don't have the money to continue funding Driftwood at all, and so they're not in a great position. They're not in the horrible position, but they're not in a great position, and they really want to get something done, because doing nothing is over time is going to get them in a worse and worse position. And who knows what will happen with Bechtel. I think there is a date for, oh my gosh, I did a video about this and I don't even remember the date. I think it's the end of March maybe, where things are at least locked in to some degree until that point. And after that, they'd have to go through and make sure Bechtel is okay to renew that. And frankly, Bechtel has a lot of work on their plate right now. So who knows if of course they would want to continue with Driftwood, but if Driftwood is just stringing them along, they may not want to continue. I don't know at all. I'm just saying, like, there were some dates in there. I could, I'd have to pull up the change orders and look at it. But that's my recollection, was the end of March was a drop dead date for something on those contracts. Sorry, I see some comments. Ryan Gilbert asks, are they in danger of delisting? Yes, I do think that is true. I don't recall, when did they really drop below $1? I want to say it was in Q3. Here, let me I guess I have a direct link here. So if we go here and look back, so generally they're on New York Stock Exchange. I don't recall those rules off the top of my head, but I think it's generally being under $1 for too long is where it starts to be the major risk. I think it's usually under $1 for, don't quote me, but maybe 6 months or so. I think it's 180 days. And so this started on October 9th. So if my recollection is correct, they wouldn't be delisted for 180 days. I mean, they should have filed an 8K for this once they had a certain number of days. I don't remember. But my recollection, I think this is for NASDAQ, so maybe New York Stock Exchange is the same. 6 months of being under $1, I think, is where they finally draw the line, and they say, hey, you're getting delisted. At their market cap, they could do a reverse split and still stay listed. And I imagine if it gets to that point, they probably would. Of course, the company is going to try to get their stock price back up. That's what happened in 2020 is, they were at risk of delisting. Eventually, they signed some deals and the stock went back up, and they just, were back in compliance with those regulations. Well, Kaza says, in a period of 5 days, the Tell share price has shot up over 16% so far. Yeah, it has. You look at the past month, it looks, pretty good, especially, yeah, if you're going back to pick the bottom down here, it has gone up quite a bit since, where it really, really bottomed in the middle of November, which is great, but, sorry, I'm reading the chat. Transient Sacker says, what do you think about what Souki was saying about Tellurian being the last LNG export available for importers to invest in? So that is a big reason as to why I am still invested in Tellurian and still holding the position that I have, that, at its peak was probably 15 or 20% of my net worth. At this point, it is drastically lower than those numbers. But yes, I think that is really the bull case for Tellurian right now as to why folks would do business with them, because they have done a lot of this prep work at the site. They've, at least if you listen to all of what Souki says, they've optimized the schedule as best as they can for being able to, once they get the financing, execute as quickly as possible to get gas on the water. And I think that's generally the case, right? These facilities take a long time in the US, a long time to even get permitted. So there's a lot of visibility there. And there's a finite number of these sites. There's a finite number of places where the gas is available. There's just a lot of constraints on this, and they've got one of these. And so it is very valuable, right? And I think the demand for LNG is there. And so as he says, we all joke about it, but the fundamentals really are there, and that hasn't changed. That's been part of why I've been investing in the company for years and years and years, because the fundamentals are still there. It's been to my detriment. So, again, make all the jokes you want that I've lost money on this thing, in terms of unrealized losses. I average out a couple of times, but I mean, the fundamentals are still there for the company. So they make this deal, they get things going. There really is, in my opinion, there really is a lot of upside if they can make a halfway decent deal on this thing. Wakaza says that means 25 cents more and hold for 10 business days, and they avoid delisting. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of delisting, they just got to go over $1 and hold it for, I think it's 10 business days. That's totally correct, at least for NASDAQ. I think New York Stock Exchange is the same, although I'm not positive. Yeah, so the fundamentals on a global basis. Thanks for adding that one on. He says it all the time. I think even I chuckle every Tuesday when it comes out. It's don't want to say it'd be a drinking game, but you watch too long of a video and you'd get pretty hammered if that was the case. All right, I don't have anything else. I'll give it still another minute for folks on the chat if y'all got questions or comments. I'll go through my normal spiel while I'm waiting at the very end of the streams. I've been trying to do these every Sunday. I talk about a variety of different stocks. If there's something in particular you want me to talk about, let me know in the comments. If you're here live, comment there, or after the fact, if you're watching, feel free to comment on this video, or you can always email me. I've had a couple people who have emailed me. It should be in my YouTube profile. You ought to be able to, should be a contact me button or something. Should be able to get my email address there. Yeah. Oh yeah, and transient stacker, we may not hear that anymore. Oh, that's true. That would be a very that's a sad side effect if there are no more coffee chats, and I'm not to hear about the fundamentals on a global basis all the time. Maybe I'll have to start opening all my Tellurian streams with that. We're going to talk about Tellurian and its great fundamentals on a global basis. Sorry, I can't really do the accent. I wish I could, but I can't. All right, I don't see anything else on the chat. Oh, Wakaza says mahalo, Dustin, everyone. Yep, absolutely. Thanks for helping the stream. I have my phone here. It looks like there were 14 people here, so appreciate it. That might be the most I've ever had. It's been a great chat on here. So yeah, I will hop off, not take up too much more of your time. Thank you very much. Have a good one.